morning. We will continue to our next session. Strangely enough, we are very much on time, even earlier than that. We're going to be listening to a very good friend. I keep being the chairman in her speeches. I don't know what that means, but anyway, it's a great pleasure that I'm once again chairing this lecture of Mrs. Xenia Gonda. I was going to say something about that. It's a very interesting topic, actually, what she's going to be talking to us, because the big question that has been going on for years and years and years is what is more important in terms of psychiatric problems? Is it the genes? Is it the environment? And this is a question that goes on, and there's a lot of research and fighting between the two mainstream of thoughts. So today we will have the opportunity to listen to what Ms. Xenia Gonda will have to tell us. Just to remind you that she is a very well-known clinical psychologist. She is also a pharmacist, currently working as an assistant professor at the Department of Clinical and Theoretical Mental Health at Semmelweis University in Budapest, Hungary. Now, the title of her lecture will be Nature or Nurture, From Vulnerability to Plasticity, Importance of Gene-Extra-Environment Interactions in the Understanding and Treatment of Affective Disorders. So, we're listening, Xenia.
Thank you, and thank you also very much for this warm welcome and warm introduction. And I guess I already won the prize for the most complex and longest title. But basically what I'm going to talk about, not just simple gene-by-environment interactions, because I guess we all know that gene-environment interactions play an important role in psychiatry and in affective disorder. But what I would like to talk about today is actually how, by considering that genes do not only act by themselves, but by incorporating their possible interactions in the background of affective disorders and the background of major depression, should reshape how we design our studies, how we ask our clinical questions, and how we make use of those study results in the treatment, in the therapy of affective disorders, whether it comes to psychotherapy or pharmacotherapy. Now, if we speak about genetic research in psychiatry and genetic research in affective disorders, this already goes back to 3 decades, and at least I'm happy to say that I'm not researching the genetic background of affective disorders for 3 decades, but I have done quite a considerable amount of work on this topic. In these 3 decades, there has been thousands of studies. There has been more than 300 genetic variants implicated in the background of major depression. In candidate gene studies now, we are already moving on to genome-wide association studies. And in spite of these many studies, in spite of these many genes, many genetic variants implicated, we still know not too much. We still know only very little. What we already know is that psychiatric disorders, including depression, are polygenic and multifactorial. So polygenic means that in case of psychiatric disorders and in case of depression, we are not looking for just a handful of genetic variants influencing the emergence of this disorder, influencing depressive risk, but virtually, practically, we are speaking about several thousand, 2,000 to 3,000 genes. These genes contribute to a complex genetic architecture in the background of major depression. So we have multiple loci to investigate, and these multiple loci each have only a small individual effect. Now, what we already know also from these many studies, and not just genetic studies, but also family studies, twin studies, and adoption studies, that there is a significant hereditary contribution to major depression. If we look at general population samples, heritable factors contribute to 37 to 42% of the variation of the appearance of depression risk. However, this is valid only in general populations, as I mentioned, because the genetic contribution, the genetic part of major depression is actually severity dependent. If we look at hospitalized samples or severely depressed samples, this genetic part is much higher. It can be up to 75% in case of severe depressed patients who have recurrent major depression. So we have 3 decades of studies, more than 1,000 studies, 300 implicating genetic variants, but our reproducible effects are very few. We can reproduce the effects only a small number of genes. So it seems that it is very difficult to identify relevant genetic effects in the background of depression. One possible reason behind this is that in the majority of these mentioned studies, the contribution of the environment, the contribution of the environmental interaction is largely ignored. In spite of this, this happens in spite of the fact that we know that environmental effects are important in development of depression. We know this, as I have mentioned already, from twin and family studies. So we know that early childhood adverse experiences and even recent stressful life events, whether they exert an immediate direct effect or a delayed effect, are very important in the background of depression. And if we take into consideration all that we know from the genetic side and from the environmental side, that we find that stressful life event and genetic effects together contribute to a much higher increase in the risk of depression than simply the combination or the summary of the individual effects would be. So there must be some kind of interaction between the two. Now, I have been talking about the contribution of genetic effects to major depression. Let's say just a few words on the role of life events in the development of risk for depression. As I have mentioned, hereditary component is 37 to 42% in the general population samples, which means that if we look at the general populations, it leaves still 63% for environmental contributions. And even in case of those severely depressed and mostly genetically and biologically based depressions, where contribution of genetic effects is 75%, it still leaves 1/4 of the variance in the risk of depression to environmental effects. So that's quite a large portion still. And it is even more interesting if we consider that those distal and proximal stressors, which are etiologically relevant in the development of major depression, are fairly common. We encounter one of such events at least every 3 or 4 years. And it's even more interesting that even these depressogenic life events happen once every 3 to 4 years, depression develops only 1/5 in those exposed to these severely depressogenic life events. So it seems that there is a significant individual difference in liability, in vulnerability, in sensitivity towards these depressogenic environmental exposure. And this sensitivity is at least partially based on genetic influences. So what we believe about the genetic background of depression right now is that most of the genes which are implicated in the background of depression do not directly increase the risk of depression, but by increasing our sensitivity, by increasing our vulnerability towards these depressogenic life events. Now, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, or in this case, which comes first, genetics or environment, is up for debate. Some people believe, some researchers postulate that depression is primarily a genetic disorder, but environmental triggers are needed for this genetic liability, for this genetic proneness to manifest. While others believe that depression is largely an environmentally based, stress-related disorder, but these environmental adverse conditions lead to the risk or the development of major depression only in case somebody carries the sensitivity genes for this type of stress. Now, even the research of the gene-environment interactions in psychiatry goes back to at least 2 decades. And following twin and adoption studies, the first major molecular genetic study concerning this gene-by-environmental interaction concerned the serotonin transporter gene functional polymorphism, what we call 5-HT-TRPR. Now, this is, I guess, very well known, at least if you have ever listened to my lectures, but this used to be one of the most fashionable genetic polymorphism in psychiatry, with a vast array of studies focusing on this polymorphism. Basically, what you need to know, it has 2 alleles, the short allele and the long allele. The short allele, or the so-called S allele, is what we always traditionally considered the depression risk allele. So those who carry 1 or 2 copies of this S allele are at a higher risk for the development of depression. However, even though it was first described in 2003 that those possessing this S allele in the face of adverse life events, in the face of stress, are at a higher risk for the development of depression, in the more than 100 replication attempt, controversial results were found, and also in the meta-analysis, controversial results were found. The latest meta-analysis published just 1 month ago found that there is no association between serotonin transporter gene and depression at all. One thing to consider here is that this gene has no main effect on the development on depression. Even in the original study, the effect was only found in case of environmental interactions. So it seems that just as in case of these genes, in the majority of genes, we have to separately investigate their main effect and their effect with environmental interactions to be able to detect any kind of effect on the development of depression, if there is any. So the question is, if we have this serotonin transporter gene, the first study was a major follow-up study following subjects for over 10 years, and it found a significant gene-by-interaction effect in the development of depression. Several other studies replicated this effect, several other studies that did not replicate this effect. But the main question is, if we believe that the majority of genes in the background of depression exert their effect by interaction with the environment, is it possible to detect genetic effects in the background of depression without environmental exposure? That is, as I have mentioned, we have several hundreds of studies, several hundreds of genetic variants implicated. In the majority of these studies, environmental effects were not taken into consideration. And it is possible that we have already investigated several genes which actually do play a role in the background of depression, but without the appropriate consideration of environmental interaction effect. Maybe we simply overlooked the existing effects. Now, to test this hypothesis, we carried out a study in almost 1,700 patients. So we had subjects, so we had quite a large samples. And we investigated 7 functional genetic polymorphisms, including genes which have been previously found to be associated with major depression, either in human studies or in animal studies. Our genes included the BDNFJ, the galanin-2 receptor gene, the endocannabinoid 1 receptor gene, the serotonin 2A and 1B genes, 1A, 2 and 2A genes, the purinergic receptor gene, and of course the serotonin transporter gene. We used a complex depressive phenotype, including lifetime depression, current depression, and anxious depression as well, and we used Bayesian analysis. Now, what we found was very interesting in this study. If you look at this diagram, for each gene, the SERT, the first one is the 5-HT-TRPR, the serotonin transporter. For each of these genes, you see 3 columns. The first column is the case, it's kind of navy blue, is the case when there was no significant environmental stress exposure in the previous year. The middle one, which is turquoise, is if there was moderate stress exposure in the previous year, and the last one, which is kind of brownish, is the case when there was significant or severe stress exposure in the previous year. On the vertical axis, you can see how relevant these effects are for the development of depression. And this dotted line, this shows us, oh, sorry, I thought this would work. The dotted line shows us the limit of relevance at 0.4. Anything above it is relevant for the development of depression. Now, what we found was very interesting. If you look at all the navy blue columns, then you see that none of these genes, which have been previously found to play a role in major depression in animal and human studies, none of them were actually found to be relevant for the development of depression in the absence of any type of environmental exposure. The other interesting thing we found is that some genes were more relevant in case of moderate exposure, and other genes were more relevant in case of severe exposure. So it seems that the severity of stress is probably mediated by different genes, by different neurochemical systems. And the third interesting thing what we have found is that this poor serotonin transporter gene in this study was not relevant in any levels of exposure. It was not relevant even in case of severe stress exposure. So what might be the possible reason behind this lack of effect, what we found in our study? What might be the possible reason in the background of controversial replication studies, controversial meta-analysis in the last 20 years since the identification of the serotonin transporter gene as a possible contributor to depression? We carried out one more study where we were actually subtyping recent stressful life events into 5 or 4 types, and we were investigating not just as a whole as environmental stress, but different types of environmental stressors. And what we found is that serotonin transporter gene was playing a role only in mediating the effects of physical, financial, and economic stressors. It was not mediating in our whole sample. It was not mediating the effect of severe health problems, severe legal problems, severe intimate relationship problems, or severe social network problems, only specifically severe financial and economic stressors. Now, this is not so surprising because financial and economic stressors tend to be more pervasive than other types of life stresses, and they are generally present a risk for sustainment for generally existence. Now, if we looked at specifically gender differences, then we found that this effect was replicable only in males but not in females, which is of course not so surprising again because generating the means for existence, that is generating the financial and economic background for existence, is a bit more closely related to the traditional male role. if we look at age effects in our samples, then our results were even more interesting, because what we found is that this effect, that the serotonin transporter gene selectively mediates only the effects of financial and economic life events, was found only in those aged older than 30. While in the younger population, in those under 30 years of age, we found another very interesting effect. In this case, serotonin transporter gene mediated the effect of social network disturbances in the development of depression. And what was even more interesting than the effect that it mediates the effects of different types of life events in older and younger adults, was that in this case, the effect of the serotonin transporter short allele, which is generally the depressogenic allele, was actually protective. So in case of social network disturbances in the previous years, those who were carrying the depressogenic risk allele, the S allele, actually had a lower risk of depression. So in this case, it seemed to be protect against the development of depression. Now, if we consider in a whole what we know about the role of the serotonin transporter polymorphism, this is not so surprising, because although originally it started out as a genetic variant increasing the risk of depression, in the last 2 decades we have several studies, and we found out that it does not only have negative effects, it also has positive effects. Now, again, this is not so surprising, because these genetic variants appeared through evolution, and then they persisted through evolution through natural selection. Why? Because they probably have some adaptive effect, they probably have some positive effect. So any gene that is involved in any psychiatric disorder or any kind of disorder which increases the risk of a disorder to develop possibly has or probably has also a positive and an adaptive effect. So in all these studies, which are human and animal studies which I have listed here, they found certain types of effect of the serotonin transporter, and what they found is that is not necessarily negative. Serotonin transporter, for example, increases the likelihood not only of negative emotionality, but also of increased positive emotionality, and it leads to increased social cognition, both of which are, of course, adaptive. Now, if we look at the positive and the negative effects of the serotonin transporter gene, then what we found is that whether its effect is negative or adaptive and positive depends on the environmental context this genetic polymorphism acts in. In general, what we can say is that the serotonin transporter polymorphism increases the sensitivity towards motivationally important external stimuli, that it leads to hypervigilance. Now, in normal conditions, hypervigilance is associated with anxiety symptoms, with depression symptoms. However, if it appears in the right environmental conditions, then actually it's quite adaptive. If the environmental is unstable, and if there is a possibility to avoid an unfavorable outcome, an unfavorable situation, and there is a possibility to make a decision to avoid this unfavorable situation, then this increased motivational response and hypervigilance is adaptive, because actually this makes it possible for those who carry this risk allele to simultaneously avoid the risk and also exploit the situation, exploit the opportunities which are present in this unstable situation. Under normal circumstances, the effect of the serotonin transporter S allele is not negative. It encodes for social sensitivity. It also encodes for increased adaptive capacity towards environmental changes. Now, what's important when it comes to studies and when it comes to designing studies and interpreting the study results, what is important is that if the effects of this genetic polymorphism can be detected, are manifested only in interaction with the environment, and if the effect of the genetic variant can be different in case of different environmental effects, in case of different environmental conditions, and if the effect depending on these different environmental conditions can be quite opposite, in certain cases it can be a risk effect, in certain cases it can be a protective effect, then if we do studies on the effect of this genetic polymorphism and we don't stratify according to different type of interacting environmental effect, then that it is very possible that the resultant effect, what we see in the research, what we see in the study, is that the resultant is zero. So there is a very important effect. There are very important different effects. And actually what we detect at the end of our study is that there is no result. So what we have to keep in mind when designing studies and when considering genetic variants in the background of depression is that the effect of genetic variants is not necessarily negative. They appeared through evolution and they were selected through genetic selection because they carry some kind of adaptive and positive effect. So in order to be able to understand this effect and in order to be able to understand their importance, we need to understand more than just the vulnerability, more than just the negative effects associated with them. We have to understand the full spectrum of their possible effects. This is the way we could exploit these genetic variants, not only to understand how they lead to the disease, but through understanding their positive capacities, how they could be used for prevention, how they could be used for early screening, how they possibly could be used for therapy. For example, in this case of the serotonin transporter, what we know that besides increasing the risk of depression under some circumstances, it is also increasing the likelihood of social sensitivity, which is the sensitivity towards social support, which is one thing we could exploit during psychotherapy. Now, if we are speaking about the relationship between genes and the environment, then we see that this relationship can be manifold. The simplest scenario is a simple additive effect between the genes and the environment, when the effect of the gene and the effect of the environment are simply added up, simply summed. Now, one more complex association is the gene-environmental correlation, one which is also very frequently overlooked in genetic studies. Because we have to keep in mind that genetic effects do not only interact with the environment, but also influence the likelihood of exposure to certain environmental factors, to certain risk situation, risk life events. This has been already shown in twin and adoption studies. Now, there are several possible types of gene-environmental correlations. One is the passive type, when actually we inherit certain genes from our parents, and our parents, who possess partially the same genes, also create some type of environment for us, which affects, and the effects of the genes are manifested in this genetically influenced environment. The other two kinds is when we are more actively involved in these gene-environmental correlations. The active type is when we choose risky environment resulting from our genetic background, and the evocative type of gene-environmental correlation is when our behavior influences reaction from others and elicits certain type of risk reactions from others, which increase the risk of our risk for depression. And of course, there are the gene-by-environmental interactions. Traditionally, we applied the diathesis stress model, which said that vulnerability towards environmental triggers is a function of our genetic background, our function of our biological background, and this biological and genetic background may buffer or exacerbate the effect of this environmental stress. But nowadays, we tend to incorporate not only negative but also positive effects from the environment, and we tend to favor the differential susceptibility model, which says that the biological context actually modulates sensitivity towards both positive and negative environmental stimuli, and thus the environmental is not vulnerable towards these environmental effects based on this genetic background, but actually plastic towards it. So the outcome can be both positive and negative. Now, to understand these basic types of gene-by-environmental interactions, we have these diagrams to help us. In all of these diagrams, the blue line is when the person carries no risk alleles. The red line is when the person is homozygous for the risk alleles, and the yellow one is the heterozygous condition with one risk allele and one wild allele, one no risk allele. Now, this fun type of interaction is the traditional way of looking at genetic effects and environmental effects in the risk of psychiatric disorders. In this case, for the risk allele, in the absence of environmental risk, there is no increase in the probability of the illness. But if the environmental risk factors increase, in those who carry these risk allele, the probability of illness also increases. This is what we used to believe, but now as we look at more plasticity and not vulnerability, we are more favoring the crossover types of interactions, where the risk SMP is not necessarily harmful anymore because it can have positive and negative effects, and whether the effect of this genetic variant is going to be positive depends on the environment. In this case, what we see is that the risk allele is actually protective in a low-risk environment. If there is no environmental exposure, then the probability of the disease to develop is actually lower in case of those carrying the risk allele than in case of those who do not carry. But as the environmental risk exposure increases, the risk associated with this risk allele actually increases, while the risk associated with the wild-type allele, the no-risk allele, actually decreases. So genetic variants, according to this model, may play a very different role depending on what environmental context they act in. Now, this is the same model, except in case of the wild allele, the risk is homogeneous, there is no risk increase and decrease, but also in this context, the so-called risk allele is protective in case of the absence of environmental risk. Now, for different genetic variants, this crossover may happen at different severities of environmental risk. So what we know is that the role of different genetic variants shows a great difference depending on the environmental context they actually appeared in and the environmental context they actually end in. And in order to be able to understand these genetic effects, we have to consider the full spectrum of these possible environmental influences, including not only negative ones, but also positive ones. And this is one problem where our present research is biased, because when we are investigating genetic background of affective disorders, we always focus on the negative. We ask negative questions, we focus on negative environmental influences, we ask biological questions related to illness, related to pathology, related to negative outcomes. But if it's possible that these alleles predisposing to illness in interaction with certain environmental conditions are adaptive and decrease the probability of illness in low-risk environments, then we have to view them in their full complexity. So we always have to look not only for negative outcomes, but also positive outcomes. So if we follow this model and this line of thought, then we have to understand that these gene and environmental interaction do not actually mean predisposition or vulnerability for mental illnesses, but they constitute a kind of plasticity. So the biological context modulates sensitivity not only to negative environmental effects, but also to positive ones, and as this makes individuals not vulnerable, but plastic. And these risk alleles are better called phenotype plasticity alleles because they do not necessarily carry risk. In certain conditions, the risk allele can actually be the protective allele. And depending on the negative and positive nature of the environmental influence, they may predict better or worse outcomes. So they may predict likelihood of illness, but also protection from the illness. Now let's look at how these gene-by-environmental interactions can be used in pharmacotherapy. What are their implications for actually pharmacotherapy? This is a big question because efficacy of pharmacotherapy for major depression at present is far from being satisfiable. And if we understand that depression is a homogeneous phenomenon, which is underlined by multiple neurological systems, then we also understand that in certain subtypes of depression, different environmental influences may play a bigger or larger role. So depressions can already be subtyped according to the role of environmental risk in their development, as used to be present in the traditional distinction between endogenous and reactive depression. Now, if depression is a heterogeneous phenomenon, which is underlined by multiple neurological systems, then it's obvious that different mechanisms need to be targeted during the treatment in case of different subtypes of depression. And these different mechanisms, different neurochemical systems, how we identify them is based on, in part, the clinical presentation of the given depressive syndrome. And it can also be based to a certain extent on etiological factors, for example, by considering how much contribution the environment has paid to the development of the actual clinical picture we are facing. And it's quite straightforward that if the role and effect of genetic factors playing a role in the development depression is a function of the environment, then these gene-by-environment interactions should play a role also in the effect of genetic factors influencing treatment. So not only should we consider the interactive environmental effects in the development of depression, but we should also consider them when we are choosing the treatment for depressive disorders, and when we are designing clinical studies to be able to correctly evaluate the efficacy of antidepressant medications. Now, if we look at just the genetic effects underlying antidepressive efficacy, independently of environmental effects, then we get to the same problem what I have been talking about concerning the genetic background of depression in the beginning of the speech. There have been investigations to several genetic variants with only a very few replicable studies. One which has been constantly replicated is against the serotonin transporter functional polymorphism, which has been associated with a worse antidepressant response to SSRIs. And also we have some replicable results for the BDNFJ to the FKBP5 gene, which is a packaging and binding protein, to the corticotropin hormone-releasing receptor 1 gene, to the NR3C1 gene, which is a nuclear glucocorticoid receptors. However, the majority of these results cannot be replicated in many studies and cannot be replicated in meta-analysis or studies like the STAR-D. So again, although we know that there is a significant genetic contribution to the action of antidepressive drugs, we are far from identifying the genes actually playing a role. If we are similar with the effect of the environment on response to pharmacotherapy. From twin and family studies, we know that the environmental exposure determines what type of treatment is going to be effective in case of depression. In case of reactive depression, which develops following severe stress exposure, we find that there is better response to psychotherapy and better response to placebo, while in case of endogenous depression, what was traditionally called endogenous depression, which develops independently of environmental exposure, there is better response to antidepressive pharmacotherapy than psychotherapy and better response to electroconvulsive therapy, and they tend to respond better to tricyclic antidepressants compared to SSRIs. In GenDAP study, it was also reported that the effect of stressful life event on antidepressant efficacy depends on medications used. So in case of some types of medications, environmental effects as etiological factors make a difference, while in case of other medications, they do not. For example, it was reported that if there has been a recent stressor preceding the development of depression, there is a better response expected to escitalopram, while in case of TCAs, and specifically nortriptyline, it doesn't make any difference if recent lifefull stresses has been playing an etiological contribution to the development of depression. Now, if we look at gene-by-environmental interactions in antidepressive pharmacotherapy, besides family studies, we only have a few clinical studies, but these few clinical studies are actually somewhat promising. I have mentioned that it is quite well known that in those carrying the short allele, the previously so-called risk allele of the serotonin transporter gene, there is a worse response to antidepressants in the SSRI group. This has been replicated in many studies. However, it seems that this worse response to SSRI in SS carriers is also a function of environmental exposure preceding the onset of depression. That is, worse response can be expected in SS carriers only in case of those depressions which develop following stress exposure. This was seen in case of fluoxetine and escitalopram, and of course, again, no effect in case of nortriptyline. So it seems that this effect, again, is specific to SSRI antidepressants. And similarly, important gene-by-environmental interactions in the background of antidepressant efficacy were reported for other genes. The SLC6A2 is the noradrenaline transporter gene. Also, we have similar results for the serotonin 1B gene, for the STIN4 gene, which is another genetic polymorphism in the serotonin transporter gene. And we also see that significant gene-by-environmental interactions play a role in the therapeutic efficacy in case of the corticotropin-releasing hormone receptor 1 gene and again the FKBP5 gene. So, the effects of antidepressants seem to be influenced by the interactions of genetic and environmental factors, and response to antidepressant treatment is influenced by these environmental effects, by these environmental interactions on multiple levels. We have to consider multiple levels. One level is the environmental exposure playing a role in the etiology of a depressive episode, and the other level is the environmental exposure, the interacting effect of the environmental exposure playing a role during the antidepressant treatment itself. So we know already that antidepressant response, just as the development of depression, is both polygenic and multifactorial, and we have several levels of interaction between these multiple factors. Why it's important? Because just like in case of depression, where certain genes do make an important contribution to the development of depression, but this contribution cannot be detected in the absence of considering environmental factors, it is the same in case of antidepressant efficacy. Environmental effect may mask very important efficacy effects or very important genetic effects in the background of antidepressant action. So depending on the environmental influences during pharmacotherapy or preceding the onset of depression, certain variants may have a negative effect, may have no effect, or may even have a positive effect. So if we do not consider these interacting environmental factors, we may not be able to detect a significant effect of a given antidepressant. So the point is that in case of clinical studies, the majority of interacting environmental effects are ignored, are overlooked, but these studies show that the effects of environmental stress preceding the onset of depression or environmental stress during pharmacotherapy should be considered in clinical pharmacology studies to be able to detect the effect of antidepressive medication. So the conclusion is, from all these studies, which I have been talking about, concerning the importance of considering gene-by-interaction effects in the development of depression and considering gene-by-environmental interaction effect when evaluating the efficacy of antidepressive medications, and also possibly when choosing antidepressive medications, is there is a very complex pattern of interaction between genetic variants in different neurobiological systems and different severity, different type, different timing of stress exposure in the background of both depression and in the background of antidepressive efficacy. In the absence of exposure, the effect of several genetic variants cannot even be detected, so we may overlook important existing associations, important existing effects. And the effect of distinct types and severity of exposures may be different, both in the development of depression and both in the development of antidepressant effect. The effect of these genetic variants, depending on the type of context, on the type of environment, may be positive or negative, so may be completely opposite, or may be different in different ages or different gender groups, and the effect of different severity, different duration, different timing, and different types of stress exposure may be mediated by completely different genetic and completely different neurobiochemical systems. So if we understand how complex this interaction between stress and genetics is, how it's possible that totally different types of stressors are mediated by completely different genes and completely different neurochemical systems, then we will gain not only an increased understanding into depression, but we will help to gain possibilities to identify novel pharmacotherapy targets. We may be able to match these novel pharmacotherapy targets to different types of depressive etiologies. We may help in evaluating the effects of antidepressants if we know that we have to consider the environmental effects before the onset of depression or during the action of antidepressants. And we may be able to better subtype the heterogeneous depression category and to study possible treatment options by these sometimes. So the key point is that we have to understand the positive plastic role of the genetic variants implicated in the background of depression and also playing a role in antidepressive efficacy, because if we understand their full potential, not only their negative effects, but also their positive effects, and we understand how they interact with different types of environmental conditions, then we can exploit them for prevention of depressive disorders, for early screening, for better diagnosis, and for identifying new intervention target points for both psychotherapy and pharmacotherapy. And just one slide, thank you for all your patience to flash up my acknowledgement, because of course we are carrying out all these studies as a team and we are supporting by a large number of Hungarian governmental agencies. And finally, I would like to thank you for your attention.